I want to talk to you today a little bit about 2020. Can I be honest with you about 2020? 2020 has me exhausted. I am tired of 2020. 2019, it wasn't an easy year. I mean, it had its challenges. But, at the end of every year, our church, we get together and we do this thing where we come up with a word. What's your word for the next year? My word for 2020 was waymaker. He's going to make a way where there is no way. I'm still waiting on the waymaker. Come on, where are you at, God? Because 2020 has me exhausted. I am tired. I just want to go back to sleep. And I'll be honest, anytime there's this type of pressure and pain in life, I know that I need to pray about it. Like, we all know that as Christians, right? Like, we got to pray about this stuff. We're taught that. Like, we say it in our church. Prayer is not our last resort. It's our first response. And we've been in this series, Hey God, It's Me, talking about prayer. I'm just going to be honest. Pandemic has made prayer problematic for me. And I kind of wanted to bring you into my home office this morning. Now, I couldn't bring the cameras into my house, but I could bring my house here to the church. And so I brought you my little prayer chair this morning. For those of you who have ever watched my Instagram stories, in my home office, I got a prayer chair. This is my prayer chair, and it's set up real nicely. Camera, I want you to kind of get this shot. If you can kind of see what I got going on here, can you come down a little bit, show them? Look at how nice this setup is. You see that? My mom got us these for our wedding, these little Ellis pillow covers. This is my prayer chair setup, okay? I got my nice plant. Okay, I didn't buy this plant. Y'all know who got this plant. It wasn't me. I got my plant, I got my chair, and right next to it, I got this cool little night table that I put together myself. It's got a beautiful picture of me and my wife on our wedding day. Isn't that nice? Somebody say, aw, right? I got my devotional book, okay? This is my devotional I read every morning. My Utmost for His Heights, I like this. This is a leadership book just to make me feel like I'm becoming a better leader. I haven't read it yet, but it makes me feel good to have it, the book next to me. And so I got these here. I got my coffee with my special Sacramento cup here. Sacramento represent. And so this is what I do every morning. I get up, I make my coffee, and I sit in my prayer chair. This is where I spend time with God because listen, it's been crazy out there. It's been out of control. And so I know that in order for me to have a successful day, I got to start my day the right way, right? And it's not just Folgers in my cup, it's the Holy Ghost in my soul. You know what I'm saying? And so I get up, I make my coffee, and I go over to my prayer chair. But here's the reality about every morning routine that I have, okay? When I get into my room, I got my prayer chair set up, but here's the problem about my prayer chair. Sometimes my wife uses it the day before. In fact, sometimes my wife has been in the office the day before, and you guys know my wife and I have a different idea of what clean and organized looks like. Now, I'm OCD, obsessive compulsive, right? And so I cannot have any clutter in the room before I pray. Because if I'm sitting here in my prayer chair, but there's papers everywhere, I can't handle that. So before I sit in my prayer chair, I got to make sure everything is clean. I get the vacuum out. I vacuum the floor, make sure the vacuum lines are on the carpet. I get everything organized. And then, I sit in my prayer chair. But then I remember I got to get my coffee, so I make sure I get my coffee. It got cold while I was cleaning up my wife's clutter, so I put it in the microwave, get it warmed up again. Okay, I got my coffee. But then I remember, oh wait, I gotta check to see what's going on because the reality is people text me all the time, crazy hours of the night sometimes, and sometimes I got to make sure that I get back to these people. So I pull out my phone and I'm sitting in my prayer chair. I got my coffee. I feel good. I put some music on, maybe a little bit of worship, a little Bethel in the morning. Elevation is a little too hype for me early in the morning, so Bethel kind of gets me in the mood. I put some Bethel on, and I pull my phone out, and I don't know if you can see my phone here, but I've got these red dots on my messages and my emails. I can't handle that, right? That's clutter. So I got to clean that out. This is my morning routine. I look at my emails, and I got all this junk mail. Okay, cheapoair.com. I'm not flying anywhere anytime soon. I don't know why. You got all these CEOs emailing me saying they're sorry for the pandemic. I don't know what made me so special. Oh, YouTube's telling me E2 Church is live right now, which reminds me, I got to make a graphic about the live stream because we're not going to be on Facebook this week, and I got to remember to do that. So I make a note of that, and then you know what? I might as well just do it right now. Let me get my iPad out here, start designing this word because if it doesn't get done now, you know I'm at my most productive right now. So I start designing it, get it done. Okay, I send that over to Pastor Q because he's the one that can make it all work. Got that good to go. Get back in my. I say, you know what? I'm about to pray, and I got to know what's going on in the world before I pray, because, I'm pastor, I got to pray for the world. So let me pull up the news, see what's going on. Oh, my gosh, it's been crazy right now. Just article after article. And then I get tied into that, and I start looking. And before you know it, what started at 6 a.m., it's 8:45. And I'm already late on my way to work, and I know I'm the earliest person at the office anyway, but I still am late to get to work. And guess what happens? I didn't spend any time in prayer. Does anybody relate with this? Can you relate, or am I the only bad Christian in church this morning? It feels like every morning it's the same thing. I get up, I have such great intentions, but I get distracted. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about distractions. Because I think right now, there are so many distractions. And what's happening, not only in our world, but in your friend's life, and down the street, and on social media, and on the news, and on the websites. And it's just distraction after distraction after distraction. And let me be honest with you, they never stop. Every day I think I'm going to wake up and the red dots aren't going to be there, but sure enough, I'm on the email subscribe list. They're sending me one every single day. I got text messages every single day, messages every single day. And sometimes it's not just bad distractions, sometimes it's real stuff. People in pain, people in my church in the hospital, people struggling, lost their jobs, their marriages are falling apart, and there's so much stuff going on around me. It's so hard to pay attention with all these distractions. And so Apple, they've done a really good job to try to help us with these distractions. So they create these things like Do Not Disturb. Y'all ever use Do Not Disturb? I use it, but I always turn it off because I still need to get I'm a pastor. I need to be accessible, right? But then when the Do Not Disturb doesn't work, they created another thing like time limits. Put the time limits on social media because every night I say the same thing. I got to get off Facebook. I'm off it. I'm going to put the time limits on. So I'm only on it 15 minutes a day, right? I put the time limit on. The problem is I'm the one that made the time limit. I'm the one with the passcode. So when they say your time is running out, I'm like, 5 extra minutes. So then I'm like, let me just delete the app altogether. That lasts for like 3 hours. And then I'm like, but what if somebody messages me? I need to know. And time again, the distractions just keep coming back. And I'll be honest, I struggled to preach this message this week because I think I still struggle with distractions. Can I be real? I think sometimes pastors are the worst ones that struggle with distractions. You know why? Because we call distractions ministry opportunities. I'll get in my prayer chair and I'll be ready to spend time with God, but a ministry opportunity, a way to reach somebody, and all of a sudden I'm pulled away from the very thing that was the purpose to begin with. And here's what I've learned about the enemy, because I got some perseverance. I got some endurance. I call it holy stubbornness. Anybody like me? You just stubborn, like I ain't gonna quit. The devil knows this about me, that I'm not going to quit. You can't destroy me. But here's what I've learned about the devil. If he can't destroy you, he will do everything he can to distract you, to keep you running around in circles, busy and exhausted, so that by the time purpose comes knocking at your door, you are so tired, you can't even answer it. And this message is really not me talking down to you this morning. Can I be honest? It's me connecting with you. Because I struggle with this. I've been struggling with this. Talk back, people. Can you help me? I've been struggling with distraction this week, this month, this year. What is a distraction? We use the word a lot, but I just broke down the word literally. distraction. It's anything that attracts us away from our original devotion. It's not just obstructing devotion, it's seducing devotion away in a different direction. And I think there are so many things in our lives right now that are trying to seduce us away to desire something other than the purpose that God has for our lives. And I think if we're going to do anything great for God, if we're going to make any changes, if we're going to acquire any purpose in our lives, we got to learn how to deal with distractions. Because here's the reality. Your destiny is your purpose, and your purpose only comes through connection to God through prayer. And Jesus understood this. That's why he takes his disciples aside and he says, listen, let's pray and pray that you don't enter temptation. Temptation is just another word for distraction. Pray so that you don't enter temptation. The problem with that is not sexy to me. Because when I hear the word pray, I think about the prayer chair. And the prayer chair doesn't make me feel good about myself. Because every day I sit in the prayer chair, I feel guilty that I'm not praying enough. I feel shame that I got distracted. I feel exhausted because I don't know what to do. And so after a while, what started off as a great, encouraging moment of connection with God now is a symbol of shame in my life. And I wonder how many people I'm talking to this morning that you feel like prayer is just a word that ignites and triggers shame and guilt in your life. And whenever you look at the prayer chair, all you see is condemnation. And you hear the words of this scripture. But I want to take it one verse at a time. Look at Luke 22, verse 39. Because I believe that there's a secret in this moment that Jesus reveals to his disciples. You see, they're not only in pain, they're about to face some of the most excruciating pain that they will ever face in their life. So Jesus takes them aside and says, we need to go pray. So in verse 39, it says, coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives as he was accustomed. Say accustomed. And his disciples also followed him. Look at what it says. Coming out, he went to just as he was accustomed. In other words, he left where he was to arrive at a place that was set apart. Did you hear that? He left where he was to arrive at a place that was set apart. And here's what I need you to understand about purpose and prayer this morning. Purpose is a practice. And that practice has to happen over and over and over again. Now, if you're like me, you're the type of person that if it's not on your calendar, it does not happen. I tell people this all the time. I have a lot of meetings. I have a lot of stuff. So if it is not on my calendar, it does not happen. And there are certain things that are on my calendar all the time, right? Staff meeting, always on the calendar. Because these are people that are relying on my perseverance and my commitments to fulfill them. I got to show up. So I make sure I don't let people down. There are other things that are on my calendar at all times. I'm going to work out. That is important to me. It's on my calendar. There are other things that are important to me, but they don't necessarily make it on the calendar. And sometimes that gets played out, and it happened this Friday. You know, my wife and I, we're pretty good with being intentional on our day off to go do something. But some days, we're just lazy. Anybody just feel sometimes I just want to stay on the couch all day. And so this week, we didn't plan anything. Because last week, we had a really good plan. It was an awesome day off. We didn't plan that this Friday. In fact, we planned nothing. We didn't even talk about it. And what happened was, like every other day that we don't plan, we got on Netflix, got on the couch, and watched docuseries for like 7 hours straight. That's not an exaggeration. I'm ashamed to tell you that's the truth. But I sat there for 7 hours with my wife, and there gets that point where you feel so disgusted with yourself. You're like, I need to take a shower just to have something to do. Like, I need to just feel somewhat productive. But instead of doing that, we started complaining. We're like, what are we doing? Like, why don't we ever do anything? You ever say this on your day off? Why don't we ever do anything? We just sit here and do nothing. Our lives are horrible. Why don't we ever do anything? And we complaining, and then we're getting angry at each other. It's your job to plan out to do something. Why didn't you plan nothing? And we're getting all upset at this. And what I realize is that we never set an appointment to do something specific. Right. And the truth of the matter is, we got so much going on in our lives that if it's not on the calendar, it ain't gonna happen. And I think sometimes we treat purpose like it should happen spontaneously. But purpose doesn't happen spontaneously. Purpose is set. You've got to be intentional about setting your purpose before you ever enter into it. Because purpose and success doesn't happen spontaneously. It's not like social media, like maybe this post will go viral. And if it goes viral, oh my God, my TikTok post went viral. Now I can be who I want to be and I can have a platform. Here's the reality. It's not just something that happens. Purpose has to be set. It has to be established. You got to plan on where you're going and where God's taking you. And if you expect it, you need to schedule it. Here's the thing about purpose with God is that it's no different with your calendar appointments to accomplish anything else in your life. You need to schedule it. You need to set it in stone and say, this is when it's happening. This is what's going to happen. This is what it's going to look like. Because if I don't put it down, if I'm not intentional about it, it's not going to happen. Purpose is not accidental. It's intentional. You see, I think many of us, we don't practice this on a regular basis. We just treat it like it happens spontaneously. But look at what it says about Jesus in verse 39. It says, coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives as he was accustomed, which means this prayer moment wasn't spontaneous, it was a practice. It was a practice of Jesus to draw strength from God because he knew that what he was about to enter into was going to be suffering and struggle. And the only way for him to be sustained through that struggle was to draw strength from God. So he made purpose a practice in his life. And there are three simple things that I think we need to practice in our generation. We need to learn how to do this, myself included, if we're going to make purpose a practice in our life. Number one, we've got to practice separation. We have to practice separation. The Bible says, as he was coming out, he went to. That means he left the crowds and he went to a private place. Here's the truth. You don't rest in the middle of the road. You run on the road. You don't eat while you're on the elliptical. I hope not. I mean, I guess you could, but it kind of defeats the purpose. You don't sleep, I hope, while you're in the shower. And you can't decompress in the midst of distractions. You need a place where you can get away and separate yourself, not just from the things around you, but from the people and the situations and the stuff going on in your life. You got to learn how to leave it there and go to the place of separation where God can speak to you and you're not leaning on the voice of everybody else in your life. You got to learn how to separate yourself from the stuff that's happening in your life. You got to make it a practice to get away. A practice to separate yourself so that you can hear from God, which leads us to the second practice that we must have in our lives. We must practice solitude. It says that he not only left where he was, but he came to the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives was a ridge. It was east of Jerusalem, and it was about 300 to 400 feet above the city. It was a place that gave Jesus an elevated perspective where he could see what he couldn't see when he was on the ground. All the stuff that he was meddled into. It gave him a higher perspective, a clear mind, a place of solitude. You know, I was thinking about this yesterday because there's so many posts and so many statements. When I was growing up, there was this thing that we used to say to each other when somebody said something stupid, we would say, "Who asked you?" I was thinking about that phrase yesterday because a lot of people are saying a lot of things. And I'm thinking to myself, who asked you? And then I remembered that Facebook and Twitter all start with, "What's on your mind?" And so I think we've all gotten this idea that we can just say whatever we want, whenever we want it, because somebody's asking. And what's happened is now we have become so attuned to every other voice because everybody is talking all the time. There's so much noise and so much chatter. And here's what God is saying: listen to my voice. And you can only do that in a place of solitude. It's one thing to be separated. Being separated means I got the prayer chair. It means that this is the space that God has called me to be at that separates me from the rest of the stuff going on in my life. But solitude is getting rid of this. That's hard to do. Are you able to disconnect from what's happening on the ground level so that God can give you an elevated perspective to see what you couldn't see in the midst of everybody else? We got to practice solitude. We got to learn how to be quiet. I struggle with that. I'm a preacher. I talk for a living. I got to learn how to be quiet. Lastly, we got to learn how to practice support. It says that Jesus separated himself to a place of solitude, but his disciples followed him. I think sometimes in the church, we've used prayer as an excuse for pride. And we become spiritual elites because God speaks to me. And God said, well, did you know what God told me? And we have no spiritual accountability because we're our only source of hearing, receiving, and being accountable for what it is that we think we're hearing from God. But I love this. Jesus, the very Son of God, took other people to pray with him. Do you have support in your life to be able to speak to you, speak into you, correct you, encourage you when you're spending time in prayer? We got to make sure that we practice separation, solitude, and support. It goes on in verse 40 and it says this: when he came to the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not enter temptation." That's so important because Jesus is giving us the key, the antidote to distraction. He says, if you want to overcome distraction, be devoted. Pray. Seek the face of God. But look what happens. So then he withdrew himself, in verse 41, from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed, saying, "Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." The famous prayer from Jesus. Then an angel appeared to him in heaven, strengthening him, and being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. His sweat became like great drops of blood falling to the ground. I love this passage and I hate this passage because in one sense, we're getting an insider look into Jesus' prayer life. I mean, we are getting to see behind the scenes of Jesus' prayer life and connection with his Father. That's encouraging because that gives me an idea of what it should look like for me. And that's also why I hate it. Because when I see what Jesus is doing in prayer, that's the last thing that I want to be engaged with. And yet Jesus says, "Come pray with me." And I think that's why we avoid prayer, because we know that prayer leads to purpose, and purpose comes with pain. And I don't like pain. I'm already in pain. You know, there are certain things that I'm naturally inclined to, other things that I'm not. Golf is one of those that I'm not naturally inclined to. I've thought a few years ago that maybe I would try to pick up golf because I saw like wealthy people playing golf, and I was like, maybe I'll be cool, and maybe one day I'll be wealthy if I play golf. That lasted for like 3 hours because what I realized about golf is, number one, it's a very slow-moving sport. That doesn't work for me. I just want to hit something. You know, I like contact sports. Golf isn't my thing. The second is that it's very calculated, and it's almost like it requires math. No, that doesn't work for me either. Okay, I am not, but I tried. I did try. I said one day, I told my friend, I said, hey, can you take me to the driving range and teach me a few things? Now that, I knew when the words came out of my mouth, teach me a few things. That's another reason why I don't like golf. I don't like people telling me what to do. Don't tell me how to live my life. And so I get to the driving range, and there's a natural way that I'm going to hit this ball. It's like Happy Gilmore, you know? It's like, I saw it on TV. That's what he did, so that's what I do. And I wind up, and immediately he starts correcting me. Wrong way to get through to me. That's not how it works. I'm already not liking it. Not only is that entire time miserable, but after an hour at the driving range, my hands are blistered up, bleeding. And I'm like, I do not ever want to do this again. It was painful to try to learn how to be a part of this sport. And somebody told me, well, you just put some practice in, you just do a little, do it over and over and you'll get there. But here's what I realized is that even professionals still experience the pain of having to practice and lose and figure out how to do more. I'm like, I'm the type of person, I want to be successful and just let it sit. Like, I don't want to have to keep struggling. I should just be able to be successful, let it sit. I don't want to be involved in anything that's going to perpetuate pain in my life. And I think that when it comes to relationship with God, I think we all feel the same way. Like, can I just get saved and let it sit? Because I don't want to be involved in anything that's going to cause me to struggle any more than I was before I got saved. But here's what I've learned about humanity. Struggle is standard. Like, when you buy something and there's like the elite package, then the standard package, struggle is a part of the standard package of humanity. In fact, the reason why you hurt is because you are human. And here's what I love about Jesus. Even Jesus was hurting and begging for distraction. You see, when I'm in pain, I just want to do whatever I can to get my focus off of the pain. That makes me feel like a wimp sometimes, like I don't have a high pain threshold. But even Jesus in the garden kneels before his Father in such anguish, and he says this, please, distract me from this. Take it away from me. If it's your will, please don't let me focus on what's ahead. But then he says, but if you won't give me a distraction, then give me a devotion even greater so that I can fight through the fears that I have right now and get to the other side. But this process of purpose, it comes with pain. That's why Jesus says, pray so that you don't fall into temptation, so that you don't get distracted, because that's what happens when you're in pain. We want to distract ourselves, inebriate ourselves to just get our mind off of the stuff that hurts so deeply. But I've learned something about pain. Oftentimes, pain is what reveals true purpose in my life. Isn't it crazy that throughout this pandemic, we've all reacted differently to the limitations that we've been given? There are some people who work out, and for a hobby, they exercise. But as soon as they couldn't go to the gym, as soon as all the facilities were shut down, they're like, I guess I got 3 months off. Let's go. Maybe it's an intention. Maybe it's like, I want to do it, but I just can't do it. And then there are people that are like serious about fitness. They spent like $1,000 on one set of dumbbells because they are not going to go a day without lifting weights because it's important to them. And the truth is, not every single one of us has a purpose to value fitness at that level in our lives. But some people do. And pain reveals when something is just convenient and when something really is a calling. Let me say it like this. Sometimes the cross that you carry is concealing the calling that God has for your life. Can I speak to people who are angry right now? Your heart burns because of the injustice that's happening. Maybe in that anger is an assignment. Maybe in the cross that you feel like you're carrying is a calling that God has placed. And the only way that purpose would be revealed is through pain. And in the place of prayer, God begins to speak to you and says, the reason why you're carrying that cross, Jesus, is because you're going to take that cross and open up salvation to the rest of the world. Maybe in the crucifixion, maybe in the pain, there's a purpose hidden. The Bible says, Ephesians 4, be angry and do not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger, lest you give place to the devil. What is the writer saying? He's saying this. When you're angry, when you're frustrated, when you're distracted, when you're feeling compelled, go to God. Because there's something in that struggle. In fact, the struggle is a setup. Because as Jesus is wrestling with this pain, look at what happens in verse 43. It says, then in that place, an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. When you are weak, he is strong. And I came to tell somebody today that's struggling in the place of your struggle, God is about to give you strength. Don't quit now. Don't stop now. The power of God is about to meet you in your pain. And where you've struggled, you're about to be strengthened. But don't quit. Don't stop. Don't leave the presence of the Lord, because it's only in the presence of God where pain can be turned around to power. The only problem is that you're given power to then go back into the pain. When I get strengthened from God, I want to sit in that strength. I want to rest in that strength. I want to celebrate that strength. But Jesus doesn't sit in the strength. He goes back into the struggle. And in verse 44, it says, right after he was strengthened, being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And I want to encourage somebody. I know that you're struggling right now. When you draw strength from the Lord, that strength is not for you to stop short of the thing that God's called you to. It's so you can get back into the game, get back into the battle. I got strength to overcome this struggle, because I'm not just here to be at ease. I'm here to overcome. I'm more than a conqueror in Christ Jesus. And I got strength that comes from somewhere other than myself. There's purpose on the other side of pain. But I want to come to the landing spot of this passage, 45. It says, when he rose up from prayer, he came to his disciples. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read this, I just see my name. As Jesus came up, he came over to Jared. And he found them, look at this, verse 45. Sleeping from sorrow. Sleeping from sorrow. I'll be honest with you, this morning I really didn't want to preach this message because I still struggle with distraction. And every time I do, I hear these words of correction. In another gospel, it says that while they were sleeping, Jesus woke them up. And he says these words, could you not bear with me for an hour? That's how I feel every morning. I get so distracted. I was supposed to be here to pray. I was supposed to be here to partner with God, and an hour went by, and I'm distracted. And here's what I learned about distractions. I'm usually the most distracted when I'm the most discouraged. Asleep from sorrow. I just don't want to wake up today. I don't want to look at my phone. I don't want to scroll through Twitter. I don't want to read the news. I just want to go back to sleep. I wonder how many people are sleeping on purpose because all they can see is pain. I feel the Spirit of God so strongly on this because I know that right now in your life, there are some areas where you are so distracted. And you may not be sleeping physically, but in your soul, over and over, you are scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And scrolling is the same thing as sleeping. You're distracted. You know, when worship team, you guys can come back up. When a woman is pregnant and she's about to have a baby, she gets into the hospital room and they tell the woman that while she's pushing and about to give birth, find a spot in the room or find something that you can look at and focus on throughout this process. Because what's about to happen is so painful that the way that your body reacts to it is that it actually will begin to shut down if the pain is so great. I did some study into this this week as to why this happens, because it's not just pregnancy, but it's pain that can cause people to pass out. Maybe you have passed out because something was so painful in your body. But the truth is that we're all built a little bit differently, but the reason why our body knocks out because of pain is because there are chemical reactions and hormones being released into your body to deal with the pain. There's a difference. There are these two hormones that are released simultaneously. And when one hormone gets greater than the other, what happens is it begins to draw blood away from the brain to rush to the body. Sometimes to the digestive system, sometimes to the area where the pain is. But whatever it is drawing blood away from the brain. And for you to stay awake, you need blood in your brain. And so when these hormones, when these chemicals are released in your body and it starts pulling the blood away from your brain, you start to lose consciousness. And so they tell women, hey, while you're giving birth, make sure you have a focal point. Something to focus on, and it's all built around something called the gate control theory. I want you to bear with me because this is interesting. The gate control theory says this: the reason why focal points work to deal with pain is because the brain processes the information you're seeing more than the distraction of the pain. I didn't write this, I just found it. Leaving less brain activity to process the pain. You see, your brain is sending signals to your body to release these chemicals. But when you focus your perspective on something, there is more brain activity on what you're focused on than the pain that is trying to distract you and cause your body to lose consciousness. Here's what I want you to understand. Whatever you focus on can determine the future of your life. In other words, purpose requires perspective. What are you focused on right now? What's your focal point while you're walking through pain? Does that pregnant woman not feel the pain? Of course she does. But here's what perspective does. Perspective doesn't ignore the pain. It just reorganizes the pain. It's not that I don't feel it. It's just that I don't make it first. And here's what Jesus is doing in the garden as he's kneeling down, sweating drops of blood. He feels the pain. He's wrestling and struggling with the stress, but something that he saw as his focal point was beyond the pain that he was feeling in that moment. And Hebrews 12:2 says this, that for the joy set before him, for the joy was his focal point. He endured the cross, despising the distraction, so he could get to the other side, which was destiny. There's something on the other side of this pain, and I'm not going to let pain determine my perspective. I got purpose on the other side of this pain. Jesus felt the pain, but he never lost perspective. You see, devotion overcomes distraction. And when we're walking through pain, it's so easy to feel the dread But I want to challenge you today to see the joy beyond the dread. Can you see what God is doing in the future beyond your current frustration? Can you allow purpose to be dictated by a perspective that is prophetic, not seeing what I see, but seeing beyond what I can see? I got perspective. But sit down, I'm almost done. Here's what I want you to realize. Sometimes all I see is the pain. When I look at the prayer chair, I see shame. In fact, when I'm walking around doing my stuff throughout the day, I'm not as distracted as I am when I'm sitting in the prayer chair. For some reason, it's in this place that I should be devoted to God that I'm the most distracted. And I began to ask God, why is that this week? He said to me, Jared, you see, the chair is the challenge. Are you willing to step into the struggle so that you can overcome the space for distraction? Because I'm not distracted over here. I'm not distracted when I'm going about my day. I'm distracted when I'm trying to be devoted, when I'm trying to hear God's voice. But the question is, are you willing to endure the space of devotion to overcome distraction? I'll be honest, more times than not, I struggle. Jesus finds me just like he did in Matthew 26, verse 40, and says, couldn't you just pray with me for an hour? I think the reason why prayer is so difficult for us to talk about is because it's not just that we fail ourselves, it's that we feel like we fail God. I feel like I disappoint God when I don't do enough, when I don't pray enough. So maybe if I just avoid it altogether, I don't have to deal with feeling the shame and guilt. But here's the key that I want you to hear from me today. I think for so long, when I read this story, I focused on my own failure to pray through pain. And I neglected to recognize the one who was just a stone's throw away from me, who persevered and endured through pain and prayed for me even when I couldn't pray for myself. I want to go back to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, because we didn't read the first part of the verse, but it's the key to the focal point. Look at what it says, Hebrews 12, 2. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat in the chair. Romans 8, put it up on the screen. It says, Christ Jesus, who died, more than that, he rose to life, is now seated at the right hand of God, doing what? Praying for me. And here's what I realized this week, that when I failed to sit in the prayer chair, Jesus has been sitting here the whole time. And when I couldn't pray, and when I didn't pray, and when I failed God, and when I was distracted, he was devoted and he endured, he persevered, and he is still praying for me, and he's praying for you. When you don't have enough strength to utter the words of prayer, God is praying on your behalf. He sat in the chair and he persevered. He's not distracted. He's been devoted and he overcame death. He's not dead. He's alive. And he's praying for you, and he's praying for me. 2 Timothy tells me this, that when I am faithless, he is faithful. And I want to end this message encouraging you with this. I had a conversation with a friend of mine this week, and we were talking about everything that's going on. And he said this statement to me. It was so profound, because Can I be honest with you? This week I felt like a failure. I felt like I wasn't doing enough. I felt like I wasn't praying enough. I felt like I just wasn't enough. And here's what he said to me. It shook me this whole week. He said, I want to look like Jesus, but I also want to look like I need Jesus. I think so many times we're so obsessed with looking like Jesus that we forget that Jesus is Jesus. And when I fall short, he is still Jesus. And he sat down in the prayer chair, and he has never failed me. He will never fail me. He is faithful. And when culture and when the nation and when people fail me, he never fails me. He's been praying for me. He's been lifting me up, and I can rest assured that I got a God who's praying for me. When you are faithless, he is faithful. It's all about Jesus. It's always been about Jesus. And I believe that if you are asleep from sorrow today, get your focal point, put it in front of you, and fix your eyes on Jesus.